The station is groaning around you. Steam hisses from a broken pipe, masking the sound of something heavy moving in the vents above. You're crouching under a desk, clutching a motion tracker that's just a little too loud. In Alien Isolation, you play as Amanda Ripley, a character with the plot armor to survive the perfect organism. But let's be honest, you aren't Amanda Ripley. If we strip away the respawn button and the programmed AI limitations, the reality of facing a xenomorph is much shorter and bloodier. The first mistake you'd make is thinking you could hide. First, we have to dismantle the hold breath mechanic. In the game, you dive into a locker, lean back, and hold your breath as the alien sniffs the vents. If you time it right, the creature loses interest and leaves. In reality, holding your breath is physically useless against a predator of this caliber. You are fighting an organism that evolved in the hostile vacuum of space or on hostile exoplanets, designed specifically to hunt biological life. Think about the great white shark. It possesses specialized organs called the ampullae of Lorenzini, jelly-filled pores that allow it to detect the faint electrical fields generated by living muscle tissue. A xenomorph is an interstellar apex predator. It doesn't need to hear you breathe. It can likely sense the electrical impulses of your heart beating through that thin metal locker door. While you're turning blue, trying not to exhale. Your heart rate is spiking to 160 beats per minute due to panic. To a creature with electroreception, you are a lighthouse blinking in the dark. Then there is the issue of echolocation. We know the xenomorph produces a distinct hissing sound. In nature, bats and dolphins use similar vocalizations to map their environment through sound waves. If the xenomorph utilizes any form of biosonar, hiding behind a crate or a desk does nothing. The sound waves would wrap around the object or pass through gaps, creating a clear acoustic image of your shape huddled in the corner. You aren't invisible just because you've broken the line of sight. This brings us to the line of sight fallacy. Video games teach us that if we can't see the monster and the monster can't see us, we're safe. But you are constantly emitting a biological signature. When you're terrified, your body dumps cortisol and adrenaline into your bloodstream. You sweat. In a recycled air system like Sevastopol Station, your pheromones would travel downstream instantly. You aren't hiding. You're broadcasting your location chemically. Furthermore, the xenomorph lacks visible eyes in its classic design, implying it sees the world through other spectrums, likely thermal. You're a 98.6 degree heat source in a station made of cold steel. To a thermal hunter, you are glowing through walls. You might try to use a noisemaker or a flare to lure it away. In the game, you throw a flare in the corner and the alien investigates the light like a moth. This assumes the creature is stupid. A true apex predator understands cause and effect. If a flare comes flying out from behind a crate, a wolf or a tiger doesn't just look at the flare. They look at the trajectory to see where it came from. If you throw a noisemaker, you have just told the xenomorph exactly where your arm was a second ago. And finally, let's talk about that locker again. It's the most common survival tool in the game, but physics makes it a death trap. A metal locker is essentially a resonant chamber. When you hyperventilate inside a hollow metal box, the sound waves bounce off the walls, amplifying the noise rather than muffling it. You're essentially sitting inside a drum. The screech of the rusty hinge when you entered, that echoed through the corridor. The sound of your clothes rustling against the metal, that's audible for 50 feet. The game allows you to disappear into these boxes, but in reality, you haven't found a sanctuary. You've packaged yourself in a convenient, resonating lunchbox. If the locker is a coffin, the motion tracker is the shovel you use to dig the grave. This iconic device is the single most dangerous item in Amanda Ripley's inventory. Not for the alien, but for you. The game treats the tracker as a passive listening device. But look at the mechanics. It emits a high-pitched rhythmic ping every time it sweeps. You are stalking a creature that we've already established has superior hearing, likely capable of echolocation, and you're holding a device that chirps at regular intervals. Think about submarine warfare. There are two types of sonar: passive, where you just listen, and active, where you send out a sound pulse to bounce off targets. To see the enemy with active sonar, you have to shout at them electronically. By using the tracker, you are essentially walking through a library screaming, "Is anyone here?" every 3 seconds. Even if the device uses ultrasonic waves that you can't hear, the audio feedback you hear is audible. In a silent station, that distinct electronic rhythm cuts through the air like a siren. You aren't tracking the predator, you're beaconing your position. Then there's the biological consequence of staring at that green screen. Rhodopsin bleaching. Human eyes rely on a pigment called rhodopsin to see in low light. It takes about 20 to 30 minutes for your eyes to fully adapt to the darkness of Sevastopol. But the motion tracker is a bright, backlit CRT display. Every time you pull it up to check that grainy green dot, the light bleaches the rhodopsin in your retinas instantly. When you look away from the tracker back into the dark corridor, you are effectively blind for several seconds while your eyes struggle to readjust. You are trading situational awareness for a false sense of security. In those blind seconds, the Xenomorph closes the distance. And let's talk about that grainy dot. The tracker gives you a two-dimensional representation of a three-dimensional nightmare. It shows a blip near you, but it doesn't tell you if the threat is in the room, in the ventilation shaft above your head, or in the maintenance crawl space beneath your feet. Under normal circumstances, you might be able to deduce this, but under extreme stress, your brain cannot process spatial reasoning efficiently. You'd be staring at a dot, paralyzed by indecision, trying to interpret 2D data while a 3D monster drops from the ceiling. This neurological failure extends to the hacking mini-games. The game asks you to match symbols or tune frequencies to open doors. This is physically impossible during a Xenomorph encounter. When the amygdala detects a threat, it triggers the fight or flight response. Your body pulls blood away from the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for logic, puzzles, and fine motor control, and shunts it to your major muscle groups. You literally become stupider when you are terrified. You wouldn't be able to match the symbols on the Access Tuner because your brain has physically shut down the department responsible for puzzle solving to prioritize escape. Once the tech fails and the door stays locked, you have no choice. You have to fight. The moment you acquire the flamethrower, the game shifts. You feel empowered. You finally have a weapon that makes the monster retreat. But if we apply the laws of thermodynamics to this scenario, the flamethrower is less of a weapon and more of a complex way to commit suicide. Real-world flamethrowers are heavy, cumbersome, and burn through fuel at a terrifying rate. A standard military flamethrower empties its tank in a matter of seconds, not the generous burst allowed in the game. But the bigger issue is heat transfer. The game suggests that a quick blast of fire drives the creature back. In reality, unless you are engulfing the target for a sustained period, you aren't doing damage. We have to consider the biology of the Xenomorph. It is an organism capable of surviving the vacuum of space, which implies its exoskeleton possesses extreme insulating properties to maintain homeostasis. Its carapace is likely a polarized silicone chitin composite, acting much like the heat tiles on a space shuttle. A 2-second burst of a flame might singe the surface, but the thermal energy wouldn't have time to conduct through the armor to cook the internal organs. You would just be annoying a fireproof organism while simultaneously consuming the oxygen in the hallway you need to breathe. If the fire fails, the game teaches you to crawl into the vents to escape. This is arguably the worst tactical decision you can make. The ventilation system is the Xenomorph's primary domain. Entering a confined linear tube with an ambushed predator is a statistical zero survival scenario. Humans are slow and clumsy on all fours. Our shoulder structure isn't designed for rapid crawling. However, the Xenomorph is quadrupedal when speed is required, able to move fluidly across walls and ceilings. In a vent, you have nowhere to dodge, nowhere to run, and you are entering the one place where the creature has a massive mobility advantage. You aren't escaping, you are plating yourself up. When cornered, you might pull out the revolver or the shotgun. Here, we face the problem of kinetic trauma versus armor. The Xenomorph's exoskeleton is incredibly dense. In the films, we see it deflect standard pulses and withstand immense pressure. A standard lead projectile from a .357 Magnum would likely shatter or ricochet off the carapace, rather than penetrate. And in the narrow metal corridors of Sevastopol, a ricochet is deadly. If the bullet doesn't penetrate the alien, it bounces back at you. Furthermore, the stopping power required to stagger a creature of that mass charging at full speed is immense. Physics dictates that momentum is conserved. A bullet simply doesn't have the kinetic energy to arrest the forward momentum of a 300-pound monster sprinting at you. Finally, there is the stun baton. This weapon requires you to get within arm's reach of the creature to deliver a shock. This is suicidal. The Xenomorph possesses a segmented tail that is longer than your entire body, tipped with a blade capable of piercing metal. It also has an inner jaw that can strike faster than the human eye can track. Trying to use a cattle prod on a creature that can impale you from 10 feet away is not combat. It is a volunteer execution. Even if you had the weapons and the hiding spots, your own brain would kill you before the alien did. Even if you survive the traps, the physics, and the sensory overload, your own biology is a ticking clock. The events of Alien Isolation span roughly 18 hours of continuous high-intensity trauma. The game allows Amanda to sprint, sneak, and aim with consistent precision until the credits roll. But human physiology has a hard limit known as the adrenal dump. When you first encounter the creature, your body floods with adrenaline, providing a burst of speed and strength. This is designed to last minutes, not hours. Once that initial rush fades, you enter adrenal burnout. You are borrowing energy from tomorrow to survive the next 10 minutes, and when the debt comes due, the crash is debilitating. Your blood pressure drops, your vision tunnels, and your muscles begin to tremble uncontrollably. By hour 4, you wouldn't be crouching silently in a vent. You would be physically unable to stand without vomiting from exhaustion. This fatigue destroys your ability to perform the game's core survival mechanic, crafting. The game expects you to hide in a dark corner and assemble a complex IED using scrap metal, ethanol, and blasting caps. This requires fine motor skills. However, combat physiology dictates that when your heart rate exceeds 145 beats per minute, fine motor skills vanish, leaving only gross motor skills, like running or punching. Trying to thread a fuse or tape a trigger mechanism while your heart is hammering at 180 beats per minute is neurologically impossible. You wouldn't build a bomb, you would fumble the components, drop them on the metal floor, and alert every predator in the sector with the sound of your own incompetence. Then there is the issue of sleep deprivation. You never rest on Sevastopol. In a real survival scenario, after 24 hours of being hunted, your brain would force microsleeps, shutting down for seconds at a time while your eyes are open. Hallucinations would set in. You would start seeing the Xenomorph in every shadow and steam vent. You would waste your limited ammunition shooting at nothing, or worse, you'd freeze up because you can no longer distinguish between a real threat and a phantom one. Furthermore, the game's learning AI is generous. It takes time for the digital alien to understand your tactics. If you use the flamethrower, it eventually learns to keep its distance. A real apex predator adapts instantly. If you burn it once, it won't just fear the fire, it will understand the effective range of the weapon. It will not charge you down a hallway again, it will flank you. It will tear through the floorboards beneath your feet or wait silently above a door frame. It doesn't need to learn your pattern over several encounters. It solves the problem immediately. Finally, consider the metabolic cost. Moving through a massive space station requires immense energy. Without the constant consumption of high-calorie food, which creates smells that attract the alien, you would hit hypoglycemic shock within hours. Your vision would blur, your decision-making would collapse, and you would faint. You wouldn't need the alien to kill you. Your own body would simply shut down. This brings us to the statistical certainty. Amanda Ripley is a hero written to survive the nightmare. You are simply biomass. Your heart rate, your sweat glands, your need for sleep, and your panic are betrayals you cannot control. Against a perfect organism, the only winning move is to never be on the station at all. Which other horror game protagonist do you think you could actually survive as? Tell us in the comments and subscribe for the next breakdown. Game over.